It's Weasley here, and I'm recording PRs for SBF Season 12 VGC. And basically, I just decided that I'd look over some of the teams that you guys made, and it's kind of hard to rank people because it's it's hard to be the mean teacher. It's hard to be the bad cop, but I just decided that I'd grade you on your teams in sort of a way and then rank them. So I looked over each team and looked at how well I expected to work, ran over it with green pen, which the green bar refers to key. Well, green markings refers to something that I think is very important within your team that very much benefits it. The yellow refers to something that's a little bit questionable that I feel like, yeah, I don't know about that. Red refers to something that could be a problem. The green arrow is a synergy. Red arrow is an anti-synergy. Keep in mind that all my opinions here are not objective necessarily, and they're not an indicator of whether or not you can succeed or fail within this season. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the teams a little bit because a lot of these are pretty cool. Number 16, we have DBG Sendabato, which I think that it has a lot of things going for it actually. Right here, like you have the Salazalan Komao core, which can give you Dragon Cheer, which could definitely be really powerful. Also, great fake out on here, great redirection. You have the Tailwind core right here with Kilo and Bramblegast. There's a lot of good things here, but the pro. Like, also, your team is very fast. You've got great Tailwind. You've got pretty good Trick Room as well, but I know there's a lot of things going for it, but there's just one thing that just puts it below everything else, in my opinion. It's Man, you really need a dark type. You like this is probably one of the worst weaknesses I have ever seen in a team. And it's just psychic too. Like flying is also a massive problem for your team. Ghost, you have no ghost resist. So like people are just going to bring psychic coverage against you all the time, and what can you do? You have four fighting types and two poison types. You can do a lot of things there, and yeah, I think that stuff like bramble gas is going to become like it's going to become like very very essential to your team, and also like you don't have a ton of offense when you're not using physical attackers, so you've kind of pigeonholed yourself into your fighting type physical attackers, and that's it could be so good, but it's like uh, you can run circles around people, but I it makes me nervous, right? You know? Anyway, I think you have a lot of potential. Just get yourself a dark type, okay? Number 15, we have the Clockwork Angels by Sonic R91, which there is a ton of power on this team. Just looking at the first impression of it, King Gambit is really powerful. Psy Spam is really powerful. Typhlosion with Eruption, Water Spout with Blastoise with Water Spout. You have good redirection as well with the Electabuzz, but again, it's got sort of the same problem as yeah, you have good duos. You have the Murkrow with the Blastoise, the Murkrow with the Typh. Then you have the Psy Spam duo. Then you have a Trick Room Setter and King Gambit. But there's just so much. Everything gets on. Everything gets in each other's way, you know? Like, Murkrow really likes to use those priority moves, which get shut down by Indeedee's Psychic Terrain. And Indeedee also likes to set Trick Room sometimes, which, again, if you're trying to set Trick Room for your King Gambit, your Kingambit can't use Sucker Punch in in Psychic Terrain, so it's like, and then Lycanroc can't use a Celorock in Psychic Terrain. You can't use Fake Out in Psychic Terrain. So you have a lot of priority tools, and then you decided to make Psy Spam. But I think that a lot of the tools are really good here. You've got great speeds. Like, these are legitimately really solid speed tiers, which again, with the last team as well, is something that I think a lot of the teams actually struggle with, but these two don't. But the repetition in the type chart, like, a lot of the stuff here is unnecessary. You have three fire types and you're missing a ton of different things that you should probably want. Like, you don't have a fairy type, you don't have a grass type. So, repetition I just find to be generally disadvantageous for draft teams, but I'll let you cook. Number three, we've got Team Snarl, coached by SV. And yeah, sometimes I'm uncertain of what like SV's doing. Last season I wasn't certain on it either, but he always overperforms because he's SV. Right here, one of the things I like is that you have a good trick room, you have good partners for horror work, and you can even set up Misty Terrain with your Grimmsnarl, set up screens, and go to town with a whole bunch of things. You've got a fair bit of bulk as well, but you're just missing stuff again, and you've got a lot of repetition. That's the theme with these lower ranked teams, that they just repeat themselves with their Pokemon. You have Sneasler, you picked up Sneasler, and then you picked up Toxicroak, which I don't understand because what does Toxicroak do that Sneasler can't do better? Other than I guess be immune to water moves? And also like you also don't have much reason to bring Alchemy to a lot of matches because it's just similar. Like it's a support Pokemon that's a fairy type and is bulky, but isn't Grimmsnarl basically the same in that regard? I would like to see like I think SV can do a lot with this team. But like I'd like to see some of those gaps filled up, which the speeds are a fairly big problem I think as well because outside of Sneasler and Horo, you're really slow and you don't have a Tailwind setter, which could definitely be really bad. But again, I'll let you cook. Also, you don't have a fairy resist, so Moonblast is coming like all the time. Also, don't know about the Poltegeist pick because it doesn't really do much that other Pokemon don't do better, but like, yeah. 13, we're starting to get a little better. We're starting to get a little less repetitive. And right here we have the London Leafeons by Penelope. Again, all these teams are really, really strong. You've got a ton of damage output. Ursaluna Blood Moon it's just so strong if it's positioned correctly. You've got all the right tools for it. You've got double symbiosis. You've got Tailwind as an option on both Salamence, who also has Intimidate, and Illimize, which gets it on priority. You also have other really strong attackers like Decidueye and Annihilate. Annihilate is really good, but I doubt it because like you have Lucario and Annihilate, but your only beat up user is Apom, which I makes me feel iffy, you know? I'll say Yanma, I'm not sure what it's doing here because you have an Illimize, but again, I think you should probably pick up a Steel type that isn't Lucario, just so that you can have a resist to Flying, to Psychic, and to Fairy, and also probably something a bit faster or slower, alternatively, because you don't have anything super fast, but you also don't have something super slow. I feel like, again, you can do a lot with this team. There's a lot of really strong aspects to it, but it's just missing some counterplays to some things that I think you should probably go for. So in number 12, we have the Canadian Crawlers, coached by VN, and I I honestly really like a lot of the things that are going on here. You're not missing anything really, really horribly. Again, unlike a lot of, you're not really missing anything horrible, but like one thing you are missing is a resistance to normal moves, and that sort of stings for you for VN. But also like this team, this team has a lot of things going for it. You have a lot of synergy between like Weezing and Toadscruel, Weezing and Slaking, Dendozo Tatsugiri. Electrode's going to end up being huge. You have like a top speed and a good bottom speed. But again, you have a lot of vulnerabilities, and Incineroar doesn't really. I don't think that Incineroar does much for this team because it's it's Incineroar. It's always going to be able to do something. But like a lot of your attackers, like if Weezing is out, it nullifies your Incineroar as Intimidate. If Dondozo is out, it has Unaware. It probably ignores your Incineroar as Intimidate. And a lot of these Pokemon just require certain teammates in order to function on the field, so Incineroar can't really pivot. But I really like a lot of the pieces that are going on here. I think that, again, Electrode is a really great pickup on there. I think Toadscruel is going to be really good for this team. Cottony as well, to a lesser extent. So I think that your team's actually really solid, but you do have some things that you'd probably want to work around a little bit. And right here we've got an adorable team by Wally, honestly. It's missing Jolteon because someone else took Jolteon, but there are a lot of things going for this team. Uh, Incredible synergy across the board. Actually, really solid upper speed tiers. It's not as high as a lot of other teams, but the speeds are really high. Noivern was a good pickup. I think that, well, it's fast and it sets Tailwind, which your other Pokemon really kind of want. But I think it's just adorable, and I rated an E out of 10. No, wait, an E out of 2. Let's just say that. Euler's number out of 2. Goated team, though. But here we've got a team that kind of confuses me again. I'm not sure what you were going for here. You have all the weathers. It's cool, but like you can only have one weather active at a time. And also like you are stacking weaknesses like you're stacking tiers on a cake. You don't have a Trick Room setter, which is pretty bad a lot of the time. You want to at least be able to like imprison Trick Room if you really want to, but again, you have a Torkoal, which makes it even more problematic because you have no Trick Room setter and you have a Torkoal. But I think there are a lot of cool things that you can do if you have all the weathers because you can't just reset the weather to something that's not your opponent's weather. If like name could build name Nam could build around any weather that he wants, and it's harder to prep for because you can't counter weather it. But I think it's I think it's a really interesting team. Like you've got a Sandcore and you've got great duos, but you don't have great fours. Like what four Pokemon do you bring to a match is something I think you'll have to figure out. But I think you definitely can work with this. Okay, in ninth we have the Jacksonville Jirachis by DWI, and I think that this team is actually pretty darn good. All these teams are pretty good, but it's starting to get like heat heated. I think there's some potential problems with like you don't have a ton of speed, so you're generally going to be wanting to bring Trick Room a lot, but you have Trick Room that's very difficult to stop. You have Mudstale with a beat up Farigiraf, which is honestly a really cool combination as well. I'm kind of confused about the Talonflame and the Tyranitar picks there because you don't want to be chipping down your own Talonflame to get rid of its Gale Wings. But Talonflame is great on this team. Tyranitar is also kind of great on this team. They just don't want to be there together. But I feel like what really holds this team back, because it's got a ton of power and it's brilliantly built in a way that it's almost always going first. But you have a lot of physical attackers on this team. Your main special attacker is Skeledirge, which I think is going to end up being really important, but you don't really have a lot of other special attackers. Wait, I guess Farigiraf could also count, but like its main thing isn't really the damage. And you kind of stack types a lot in a way that you have a ton of weaknesses. You have no dragon resist, and this team, it's great power, but you have to be greatly responsible with it, and how you build with it, and how you choose to go, what moves you choose to make, because of the fact that you're moving first, and how to take advantage of that. So, Dewey, good luck. Next we have the Old English Ice Cube. I think this team is very spicy. It's really you have a lot of like I'm sort of concerned about the speed of this team. It's got a ton of offense, it's got a ton of defense as well, which means that it's really good at taking advantage of the mouse hold. But I also think that what you're missing is like the X factor of speed. It's great to have Volk. Like this Volk is like fantastic. Primarina's a great bulky attacker. Metagross, Gliscor is also great at that. Even Chestnut to a lesser extent, but like it'd be great if you had like some tool to guarantee that you'd go first a lot of the time. But it's sort of limited by that in my opinion because you're not super slow and your Trick Room setters aren't great. Like Weirdeer and Misdreavus aren't the best at setting Trick Room. Don't want to bring them a lot of the time. But and your Tailwind setter is Gliscor, which might be an issue because it's not especially fast, but it's reliable at getting the Tailwind up. So I think that this team, if you give it 2 or 3 turns, it can run you over absolutely. But on turn one, I'm kind of concerned about like what do you do immediately in order to get rid of like something that's faster. So I think that you have a lot of great things going for you. Let's see how let's see how you work with them. We have in number 7 we have the Cornwall Crobats, which are by Mobert or Mossbert or Mo55 Bert, as Wally accurately put it. So in TD Armourouge is obviously really strong. Mobert has brought that. He's drafted that a lot. I think that the Gyarados, the Backs, all of this is really. It seems really solid. There's kind of some gaps along the speeds and some repetition along the types and some kind of weird stuff going on. Like, why'd you draft Wheezing? I'm guessing. Because you want to keep your Psychic terrain up, so you can't have Misty Surge, and you also can't have Neutralizing Gas, because that also neutralizes the a lot of things you want to do with your team. And the rock weakness is pretty bad, other than the Alolan Dugtrio, which I know is a Pokemon you really like. It's kind of the glue holding this team so high. But I think that you can do a lot of things with it. I've said that a lot about pretty much every team, but like, it's cool. Your speeds aren't as bad as some other teams, but they might be an issue sometimes. And your Tailwind setters also aren't ideal, but your Trick Room mode is so strong that people have to prepare for it all the time. You also have Fast Nuzzle and Fast Glare, which could mitigate it as well. In number 6, we have the Fresno Grand Bowls, and I think that this is starting to get really solid. You have multiple 4 times weaknesses to the same ground type. But honestly, this team has just such incredible damage output, especially on the special side, like Toxtricity, Crawdaunt, Typhlosion are all very, very powerful and immediately threatening. Whimsicott does a lot to facilitate all 3 of those Pokemon. And you also have potentially Clefairy, which can allow them to be bulky, especially especially Crawdaunt, I think, because like a lot of these Pokemon just need that little boost, like Duraludon. They just need that little bit better, like that little bit better defenses, and then they can set up and then they can sweep. So the Whimsicott I think is facilitating a lot of it, but you have a lot of support here. You have 3 Fairy type support Pokemon, which you sorta don't understand. You also have this Serena here, which blocks priority, which is great. But do you really need to block that priority? Like, I would have preferred if you picked like Bruxish up in place of a Serena, but I guess that's whatever. You also stack a few types. You're missing ground type, you're missing some key resistances, but you have something for everything, which I really appreciate. Number 5, we have Sorrow himself and the Pecknitz Piranhas, approved by Ozymandias. Anyway, this is the point where it's starting to get like really strong. Like this is like really creative stuff that's going on. I'm really concerned about your speed tiers because last season I Garchomp was my fastest Pokemon and it was not fun. But you also like sort of like Moppert relies on Adug, you also sort of rely on Luminion as a special attacker, as a Tailwind setter, and as your Storm Drain Pokemon. So I think it's going to overperform a lot if you use it correctly. Also, like you have some flexible options with you have 3 ground types, but they're all really good at abusing sand, and none of ground's weaknesses, other than like ice, are hugely problematic. Which again, you have answers to ice types in the form of like Excadrill, but I'm just nervous about the speed because you definitely have the power, and I'm also nervous about like it's tough for you to sweep in Trick Room. Trevenant and Gardevoir are not always going to want to run TR, but Sableye is good enough at the job. So I think you're going to do really well. Next up, Smoliv Garden, piloted by the scary Smoliv himself. Themselves, sorry. This is very, very dangerous. A very, very dangerous team. Dragonite, Ursaluna, Meowscarada. Oh my goodness. It's a pretty fast team on the top end, and they're all usable Pokemon, but it's also got some pretty slow options on the bottom end, like Ursaluna is terrifying in Trick Room. You've got a really solid like conceptualization of your team's game plan. Your Tailwind isn't great. Like Dragonite as your main Tailwind setter isn't ideal, but it's fine. Especially when they've got that much natural speed and you've got multiple fake out users. You've got like actually good fake out users too. And you got good intimidate, but the thing that makes me nervous about this team is that it's almost entirely physical attackers. Like the threatening power is coming from Dragonite, from Ursaluna, from Masquerada, from Tinkaton's Gigaton Hammer. Rotom and Rabsca are okay special attackers at best, and they're your main way of dealing special damage. So you've got to sort of try to figure out a way around that, but I think that there's definitely a ton of potential. You also have the Meowscarada flower checking with the Paldean Taros, which I just noticed. That's also cool tech, but yeah, I can't wait to see what you do with this. In number three, you've got Clark's optimal team, coached by Clark. And right here, we've got the Golden Go and Berserker, which I noticed immediately, and I was like, oh, this is gonna do a lot of damage with Make It Rain. You've basically just got a bunch of nukes here. Abasca Legion is a nuke, Haxorus is a nuke, even Camera up to a lesser extent with Eruption. You've also got like fantastic supporting pieces. You get Terrain with Ithwaki, you've got Priority Tailwind, you've got a setup potential, and very, very fast Tailwind with Hawlucha. You've got Smeargle, which is the everything support. This team also takes good advantage of Zoroark, which I like, because you can make Zoroark pretend to be Hawlucha or Basculesian or something, and it's still terrifying. But you do kind of rely on the ability to bring those Pokemon. There's just so much this team can do. There's so much ground you can cover that I think it's very, very strong. Up next, we got the Welsh Warlords coached by the the Welshiest Welshman himself, Mr. Welsh Matrix, and sorry, that was probably rude. So this is a very powerful Rain team. You know what you're doing with Rain, and you've also got a lot of stuff you can do outside of Rain. Our Chaladon in Rain is very scary. You've got like fantastic Swift Summers, Overquill and Basculegion. You've got Politoed, which is it's a solid mon on its own, but it also sets up Rain for these three. Sometimes I'm nervous about using Overquill as a Swift Summer because it means you can't run Intimidate. But also the Comfy and the Riolu are priority supports that don't need that rain up, but they can all Riolu can also get the rain up if it wants to. Braviary abuses rain, Rotom to a lesser extent abuses rain, and you just have great supporting options. And my problem with it is that you rely on rain a lot. Like, yes, you can do a lot of stuff outside of rain, but if you want to be that really, really terrifying like team, I feel like you're not going to be able to bring rain as often as you probably plan to, which could be a liability, but again, I really like this. You also have a weird thing going on with your speeds. In order to be fast, you sort of need Swift Swim. But with all this priority with this fake out, and I think you're going to be alright. You also sort of struggle to like abuse speed control as much, but I think it's really strong. You've got a lot of powerful threats and they coordinate well, so hats off. Hopefully you don't lose somewhere in playoffs again. I can't cheer for any one person specifically, but I want to cheer for everyone, you know? And lastly, drumroll please, the Rives Junction Reggies, coached by Darth Jim, are number one PRs. This is I'm gonna quote Mr. Sorrow himself from last time he did PRs. This is the best team I have ever seen Jim draft. This is everything I would ever want to use. I rate I rate this one a I rate this one a heptadecillion out of 10. Like Dragapult Volcarona, you know that I love that. I love Azumarill, I love Flamingo, I love Crocodile. Arboliva is also fantastic. You've just drafted like everything that I could ever want. You've got a gap right here in your speed tiers, but you're already so fast that it doesn't really matter, and you're so slow that this speed tie here doesn't really matter at all either. And I really can't wait to see what you put that into action with. Thank you for joining me. I'll catch you sometime.